Hello and welcome to Genre Chat. Today our genre is sports writing. Our guest today is a award-winning writer. He's written with CNN and other places. His name is Duduit. Del, tell us a little about yourself and welcome to Genre Chat.
Sherry Lynn, thank you. It's always a privilege to talk to you. As you mentioned, I am a freelance writer. I started out in the industry many years ago as a sports writer. Funnest job I ever had. Still to this day is the funnest job I ever had. It was always a blast. Was able to write for sports for our local newspaper for several years. And then when our two boys came along, I just could not make it financially, so I had to go to another realm. And I've been a pharmaceutical sales representative for 15 years, which is a great job as well. But I still love writing, still love writing sports. I like to write about anything really, but this job has given me some freedom to do that, and this last year has been wonderful. I've met some fantastic people. You for one.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we both have a lot of things in common. So during that time as a sports writer, I was able to win 2 Associated Press awards. I won an award from the Ohio Prep Writers Sports Writers Association for a series that I did, and I've always dabbled in writing, particularly for some local magazines and a couple of national magazines. I just like to keep my hands in it, and this past year has been phenomenal because I've really had my mouth around a fire hydrant, which has been fantastic. But I've been able to do great writing.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Those awards are wonderful. I see it come out in other areas of your writing. Mm-hmm. But why specifically did you choose sports writing?
Well, when I first became a sports writer, I was fresh out of college and was home, and I was working. Back then, I did 3 or 4 part-time jobs. And one of the jobs I had was I assisted the athletic department at Shawnee State University. That's now where my wife works. But the athletic director at the time suggested I talk to the local sports editor of the paper about keeping stats for him. I think mm-hmm. Do some part-time jobs there. So I did that. Became in contact with the sports editor there at the Portsmouth Times, and we developed a friendship. And he liked some of the work I did, and asked me if I wanted to cover a couple of stories or a couple of games. So I did, and that eventually worked into a full-time gig. And the hours were always odd, but it was always fun. And so from then it migrated. I was a sports writer for 5 years and won some awards. And so it was. I've always, if you write sports, you have to like sports. I mean, I've also done news, which you don't really have to like news, but to be a sports writer, you have to have not a passion for sports, but that helps. But you have to like that side of the world. You have to enjoy sports no matter what it is to be an effective and good sports writer, because you have to know what you're talking about, and you have to have passion for it, and you have to have a love for it, and you have to have a genuine interest in it to be a successful sports writer. That's the first step. You have to really like it. So that's why I chose it, because I liked it. I was familiar with it, and the opportunity was there. It was kind of the big perfect storm. It all fell into place for me, and it still is. It was a blast. It was a great job. I'd like to go. Eventually, like to go back to it one of these days. But the hours are bizarre. Mm-hmm. It's a great life for a single guy, or it's you could be married as well. But the hours are bizarre. So I would go in at 3 or 4 in the morning and get off at noon and go back in at night to cover a game, and come back home at midnight and go back in at 4. So it's odd, but I got used to it. And but you have to have. That's the first thing. That's the first genre I enjoy was sports, because I know about it, and it's fun. Actually, it can be a very fun avenue and enjoyable. You can always write about fun things, but there's some controversy as well. But it's a very enjoyable field to write in.
Wonderful. Well, what's the greatest lesson you've learned while writing for sports?
Best lesson I've learned is here lately. I've been working on a project where I've been able to talk to many well-known professional athletes, and I've been able to talk to some of the probably 3 Hall of Famers, several who probably will Hall of Fame. So, and they all say the same thing. I've talked to like 15 of them here in the last couple of months, but they all say the same thing, and it's not coincidental because they all say it, and they're all successful. They say no matter what, no matter what you want to do it. Don't give up. Don't let people tell you you can't do it.
Mm.
Whatever obstacles come your way, get through them, overcome them, because there's good things waiting at the end. I mean, I've talked to a very successful second baseman who said the first part of his career he didn't think he'd ever make it, and he's an all-star now because he kept working and working and working. And one of the athletes I've recently spoken to is Albert Pujols, who is a surefire Hall of Famer when he retires. I mean, everything you could ever accomplish in Major League Baseball, he's done it. So
Mm.
the story about him is he was selected in the 13th round of the Major League Draft, picked 249th pick overall. People were passing on him right and left, but he is called the Machine. He's called
Wow.
one of the greatest first basemen to ever play the game. So no matter what, he could have said, "Hey, I'm in the 13th round. No, nobody wants me." He kept at it and kept at it and kept at it. So that's the lesson they've taught me, is to work hard, because eventually good things will happen. Things happen for a reason. God's watching over you, and He has a plan for you. So you might have your mindset on one thing, but eventually, if you keep going and keep going and keep going, work hard, stay focused, good things will happen to you. And that's the overall greatest lesson I've learned.
That's a great lesson. Most people know when it comes to sports, people want to know the score, they want to know who played who and where they played. So those are kind of like basic stuff in a sports story, but what makes a sports article even better? Can you give us a few things, like people who are watching who want to write sports or maybe want to break out into sports? What would you recommend to be in the article besides the who, what, where, when, why, and how?
Well, that's a good point that you just brought up, because here over the last several years, that's my pet peeve, is I'll pick up the local sports section and read it, and want to read about a game, and it'll take me 5 paragraphs to figure out who won the game, because these long flattery intros, and those are great, but in the opening paragraph, I don't care if you have the best one-liner ever, the opening paragraph must contain who played, what the score was, where it was played, and maybe the big play that turned the whole game around. And one of the things that they can focus on is this: don't get into play-by-play. Don't tell Johnny ran 44 yards. That's great, but unless it was a game changer. So one of the best stories I ever wrote was I didn't even focus on the game. I focused on 2 plays that turned the momentum of the game, and you get quotes and you get what they're thinking about those 2 plays, and you go into detail about those 2 plays, or if it's one play. But folks get caught up in some of these younger writers get caught up in telling everything that happened, and you can't do that. So focus on the pivotal point in the game. Get the coach's thoughts. What was he thinking? And expound on that, because that's what people want to see. That's why they have these halftime interviews briefly with the coaches. They want to know what the coaches are thinking. They want to know what the players are thinking. And if they can get into that, that's fantastic. But always give who played and the score in the first paragraph, then expound and go into detail about that special play. It might have been in the first quarter, but go into detail about what the players were thinking, and what the coaches were thinking, because that's what they want to hear about.
That's wonderful. Now, you have to have a pass to get on the field. We know that, and to go into the locker rooms and things like that. Can you share with us one of your a particular moment that kind of, like, you're writing about something that changed the game, but what changed your writing career, or what changed you from the inside out, being on the field or the locker room, or is there a specific person or an incident?
No, well, I mean, I always have the folks that I always looked up to and admired as a kid watching, that I always wanted to talk to. And I'll advise this: don't get starstruck.
Right.
Because there's some folks I've met over the years who I kind of, as a kid, looked up to and wanted to be like, and then I met them, And it's like, oh my gosh, this person's a jerk, you know. So, but most of the time that's not the case. But there are sometimes that's
Yeah,
the case.
honesty. Yep.
Yeah, and so and going into locker rooms of professional athletes or professional locker rooms, they have to be careful. If you get a pass and a credential, it is not a time to get together interviews and get pictures because you will be thrown out. I've seen it happen. You can be on the field. That's not the place to do that because you're there to work and do an assignment. If you're seeking autographs or seeking a picture, you'll get thrown out, and you don't
Yeah.
want that to happen. You know, one of the special times I can recall years ago, I was covering, went down to cover the Reds, Cincinnati Reds, and back then. I won't get anybody in trouble, but back then, you know, you could take somebody with you sometimes. I was able to take my dad with me before he passed several games. But there was one game the Dodgers were in town, and I wanted to interview Earl Hershiser after the game. And he has a reputation and for professing faith. And so we're down in the locker room after the game, and I'm talking to him not about that, but just talking to him about the game because he pitched and had a really good game. But we're talking about things, and I just happened to mention that to him. I said, tell me how your faith helps get you through some of these games, because it was well documented that during the World Series back then, he would, in a tense moment, he would sing hymns to himself. So I wanted to get into that aspect of it about, you know, why do you do that? Does it help you? And so he started singing hymns to my father and me, and it was so funny because as it went on, all the other reporters kind of left, and so it was me, him, and my dad sitting there. And he got so carried away as we got into it that they had to come and get him because the bus was leaving and he was still not on the bus. He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I got carried away." So we kind of brought up some things and we had a really good moment there. And he forgot he was supposed to go on the bus. But yeah, that's impactful when you meet men of character like that and who will take the time to talk to you. If you approach, I'll tell folks listening, if they want to approach professional athletes, don't be starstruck. Go up to these athletes, ask them if they have a moment. Because
Yes.
people too, they have a lot on their minds too. The other day, I was wanting to. I mentioned Albert Pujols. I walked into the locker room. He was over there playing a video game prior to the game. Walk up to him, stand there for a moment. He looks over at me, says, "Can I help you?" I said, "If you've got 2 or 3 minutes when you're done, I'd like to talk to you." He says, "What about?" I said, "I want to talk to you about your faith." "Sure, I'll talk to you." But he says, "Let me get done first. Honor their request, honor their privacy as well, and don't be bombastic to them, but ask them if they have a moment, and just be honest with them, and ask them direct questions, and they'll respond to you. But if you go in wanting autographs, wanting pictures, they'll just leave you." So,
Yeah, I understand that. I was told when approaching anybody of, you know, whether they're a movie star or a sports figure or anybody, you ask them and you tell them specifically, may I have 2 minutes or may I have 3 minutes, so they know that you're not going to like take 25 minutes. And I
right.
wanted to thank you for sharing that precious story. I mean, to share that with your dad, how special. That's very special, very, very special. Now, back to the articles themselves.
Yeah.
Do different publications, like say a magazine asking for a sports article and a newspaper asking for a sports article, what would the differences be in those?
Okay, great question. A newspaper is timely. If you go to a Friday night game and they want you to cover the Friday night game for Saturday morning's publication, it's timely. You got to tell them what happened. You know what happened last night, and the results. A magazine, they want more of a featurey article. In fact, I have one coming out for Focus on the Family's Clubhouse edition. Clubhouse magazine comes out in December. They want a feature on Andy Dalton of the Cincinnati Bengals. So that's a feature story, and they want to know all about Andy, his personal life, little things about him, his favorite breakfast meal, his favorite snack, his favorite movie, things like that. But how he developed as a player. Now, if you're writing for the Cincinnati Inquirer for the next day, it is timely. It's what happened the night before. That's the difference. Magazines, you can get more featurey and go into more detail and things. And newspaper, you got to be to the point, tell them what happened when, because it is, nobody's going to pick up Tuesday's paper to look for Friday night's game. They're going to pick up Saturday's paper, so that it is timely.
Is there a word count for, like a standard word count for newspapers? I know that magazines always have different word counts, but is there like a standard word count for newspaper?
When I did it, yes, there was. My editor would tell me to say, back then it was measured by inches. He'd say, give me a 15-inch story, which came out to about 800, 900 words. So because we're working on deadline, it has to be quick, and you don't want to write 3,000 words for a football game. So yeah, so for newspaper, it's quick, to the point, tell them what happened with a little bit of detail but not much. So you want to keep it short, because most parents and most people want to read other stories. So if you write a long coverage story for a sports story, about 10, 15 paragraphs into it, you're going to lose them. So newspaper writing is short, succinct, to the point. Magazines is more detail. You can get a little longer on that. I have a couple of word limits with the focus on the family story, which I've been able to meet. But I normally don't write that long. But they said X amount of words. I was like, oh my goodness, okay. So I was able to do it. I'm more to the point. So
now, when writing, because people who may be watching this may want to learn how to write for either a magazine. Mostly I'm going to stick with newspaper articles. A lot of really good writers say read, read, read. So who would you recommend in newspaper sports writers to read to become a better writer? And maybe take a moment to, who writes in magazine articles, or what magazines, if people want to become better at writing for sports.
That's good. I like, personally, it's just finding out who you like. Reading a lot of articles is good. I did that when I was becoming a sports writer. I now like to read Bill Simmons. He's got a national following. He wrote for ESPN for a while too. Because we have a lot in common, because I've never met him, but our views are a lot the same. We like the same things, like the same styles. So find a writer that you can identify with. I like his style, and I don't copy his style, but I just like it. And I've learned a lot reading his stuff, that, oh yeah, that's a good spin on it, or that's a good perspective, because he'll throw things in as well. And that's the great thing about being a sports writer. You can at times editorialize, which you shouldn't do if you're writing news, where you're supposed to just report the facts. In sports, you can get off on that tangent a little bit and get away with it, which is kind of neat, because if a player makes a mistake that he wasn't thinking, you can put in there, Johnny made a costly error, or you don't ever want to say bonehead, but you could do something like that. Say, Billy had an ill-advised pass. You can throw it in a little bit and get away with it, because they'll say, yeah, it was ill-advised. It was he shouldn't have done that. So that's one of the little things I like about sports writing, is you can throw your opinion in a little bit, not too much on that. But I also like Chris Bouchard. He's also an ESPN guy. He covers the NBA a lot. I like his spin on things. I like the way he subtly throws his opinion in there. But go back and I would go back to some of the older writers. There's a great book, Paper Lion, that George Plimpton wrote. He was a columnist for. He was a reporter, a writer, and wanted to get firsthand perspective of what it was like to be a professional athlete. So he was able to get permission to take part in the Detroit Lions spring camp, and he was a player. I mean, he was on the roster. But so that book was written the year I was born, in 1966. But it's a great perspective of his. He was able to get firsthand look at what athletes go through. So,
what's the name of that book again, and who's the author?
Paper Lion by George Plimpton, and a great book. I also like Rob Raines wrote a book called Intentional Walk. It's a good one. Great perspective on sports. One of the best ones is John Feinstein wrote a Good Walk Spoiled. That was in 1995. It's about life on the PGA Tour and things that some of these athletes go through. But um, what you said earlier, read, read, and read. Find a writer you like and read them. Don't be like them, but kind of take some of their styles or some of their ways they write and kind of implement it into your habits.
Wonderful. Now we have a few more minutes left, and I know that because I know you write in other genres, and I know you're working on a piece right now. You probably can't talk too much about it because it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about that, Del, and tell us about this, the One Voice, the endeavor that you're doing online, and maybe how people can contact you, and I would also really love you to talk about your personal interest stories, because they've been getting a lot of retweets and a lot of visits on your website.
Yeah, the one I'll start from the one you just mentioned and go backwards because that's how my brain works.
Mine too.
I know. I do enjoy personal interest stories. Besides, sports writing, which is great, but I do love personal interest stories. The title of my website is oh my God, it's called My New Chapter, and I write about everyday people and their stories. Everybody has a story, and they're hopefully most of them have been inspiring stories. But the one I just did this past Tuesday, because I blog each Tuesday, had to do with a little boy who drowned in his family swimming pool, and they couldn't detect a heartbeat, so they began praying, and the paramedics were there. After about 20 minutes, he finally got a heartbeat. So I blogged about his experience, because he claims, he's 3 years old, I don't think he's going to lie to me. He told me he saw Jesus, and he was in heaven, and Jesus said, "Hi, Braxton, go home." And he said his hands his parents asked him, well, what was he like? He says his hands had blood on them. So, I mean, I don't know what a 3-year-old boy is going to make that up. So I did a blog about that, and the response is, I've never had a blog this big. I've had over 8,000 hits this week on that blog. So it's been phenomenal. But I post a blog each Tuesday on DelDidway.com. It's DelDuduit.com, DelDidway.com. My name's not pronounced like it's spelled. So anyway, that's where that is. And so one of the other ventures my wife and I are doing is called Southern Ohio Christian Voice. It's SoHioVoice.com, but it's Southern Ohio Christian Voice. It's an umbrella of One Christian Voice, which is out of Florida. And it gives local church news, church events, features, that some of the newspapers don't do because of page limitations and space. So we've taken on that venture this last several months, but it's been a blast. It's a lot of fun. We have trying to get a lot of support from some of the local churches, which they seem to be jumping on board. But that's called SoHioVoice.com.
Del,
yes.
I know you take submissions from people for that. Now, if somebody isn't not a believer and they want to write for as long as they're family friendly, can they write for you?
Oh yeah, they can send us. They can pitch something to us. They can send us a note, and if it's just something encouraging, something uplifting, well, sure, we'll definitely look at it. That would be a blast. Yes.
Wonderful. And if organization that's maybe not a Christian organization, but they are a reputable, like family-friendly organization wants to advertise with you, can they do that?
Oh yeah.
How would they get a hold of you? How would people get a hold of you?
Well, on both sites, there's places to contact us. On SoHioVoice.com, there's a place for contact, and on my website, there's a place to contact me.
So it's OhioVoice.com?
Sohio, SOHIO. Voice.com. Sohio, which means Southern Ohio. SoHioVoice.com.
So is it DEL, the other one? Can you spell the other one for everybody?
Yeah, my personal website is DELDUDUIT.com. That's DelDidway.com. That's my personal website with my new chapter. And then SoHioVoice.com.
And I pronounced your name wrong. I'm so sorry. I've been pronouncing your name wrong ever since I've known you.
Everybody does that. I'm used to it. It's no big deal to me.
It's Duduit?
It's French. It's Duduit or Didway in Southern Ohio.
Duduit. Oh, well, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I apologize. My son says, "Is that Mr. Duduit?" I'm
Ah,
sorry.
and
Oh, please correct me.
oh no, and you mentioned, it doesn't have to be Christian. I did a story, on Dreamfetchers,
Yes, and they were
which
Christian. They're a great organization.
had a lot of comments on that, had a lot of hits on that story. So
And
yeah, it's
Dream
just something.
Ventures is a nonprofit that helps rescue
Yeah,
animals
loved it.
and train them for service dogs and things like that. So, do you have any parting words of wisdom before we?
Yeah, if a person wants to be a sports writer, uh, go into it thinking or knowing you're not going to make a lot of money right off the bat, and it's not going to be like Everybody Loves Raymond, which is a funny show. He's a sports writer. Nothing like that. All right. It does require work. There's different hours. There's a lot of it's a blast, but you also have to be responsible. If you say little Johnny scored 14 points and he scored 16, you're going to hear it. So you better get facts right. And you the stats are very important to readers. So those need to be right on. I would encourage folks who want to get into it to start their own blog. That's all. I've done that, and I had a lot of response. Go to the local newspaper, ask if they could help, and most of them are dying for help. So yeah, they'll take help. So that's what I would encourage. Start a blog. Go to the local newspaper, local sports editor. Say, hey, is there any way I can help out? And then that could eventually work into something good.
Would you suggest people maybe write a few articles for free?
Oh, always, yeah. In fact, there's a good website that I have some stuff put on as well. It's free. It's called thesportscolumn.com. Good website. I put some things out there to them first, and that gives you exposure as well. Helps build your platform, and helps build numbers. But they also will send back something. Hey, you might want to change this or this or this, and listen to them. And don't be married to your work. Always be able to take some criticism and make some adjustmts.
That is a really good piece of advice. I know as an agent and a submissions reader, if somebody doesn't want to take any kind of advice, we don't want to work with them. So that's a great piece of advice. Yeah. Well, Del, thank you so much. You've taught me a lot because I like playing sports, but I don't know very much about sports. So I've learned a lot from you today. Thank you, and join us next time for Genre Chat.